All right, everyone, we are now live. Okay, so hello, everybody. Welcome to our very first AMA, the topic being brands and call out culture. So before getting started, I'd like to first acknowledge that we are operating on the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, specifically the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Semi-Amur nations. So before we totally get started here, let's start off with introductions. I'll start off. My name is Matthew. I'm the co-founder of And Humanity, an inclusive content agency. My pronouns are he, him, and I'll be hosting discussions today. The first guest I'd like to introduce on the panel is Adeline Nguyen. Adeline brings almost 15 years of leadership in the field of equity, diversity, and inclusion. Sorry. She's the CEO and principal of the Commons, a diversity and inclusion strategy firm. Her pronouns are she and her. Next, I'd like to introduce Emil Reddy. Emil comes from a social innovation and cultural impact background with the goal of bringing people together to create positive and meaningful change. Their pronouns are they, them. And lastly, we have Tammy Sang, my sister and fellow co-founder. She's the managing director of And Humanity, an inclusive content agency, and her pronouns are she and her. So as everyone knows, this is an AMA. You can ask them anything if you so desire, but of course, our topic today is brands and call out culture. I'm gonna start off with questions. And if you people watching have any, please feel free to comment on the Facebook post, and I promise to do my best to get to them. But just to start off, first question, the topic today is brands and call out culture. So for those who don't know what we're talking about here, can one of you give a quick overview of what it is and what's happening right now?
Oh, we shouldn't all speak out at once. I'll start it off, but please, both of you jump in. So I guess what we're seeing right now is a particular moment in time that maybe keeps repeating itself. So right now, racism, anti-racism, and anti-Black racism in particular, and anti-Indigenous racism as well here in Canada has been, I think, top of mind. It's been forefronted, media has been picking up, and it's been given a certain platform at the moment. And so what's been happening, I think there's been a little bit of a pattern we've been seeing is on the Blackout Tuesdays, we've been seeing companies, corporate companies put out the blackout black squares on Tuesday to show their support and allyship in terms of and their support of Black Lives Matter. But then what's been happening is, seeing that black square, it's prompting former employees, usually former employees, to speak out and talk about the reality of what they've been experiencing as a former employee of a certain company who is Black or a person of color or Indigenous, and saying, you know what, there is some hypocrisy here that I'm observing, because that has, sorry, they've been, so we're seeing these companies very vocally speaking out, but yet their practice in the workplace has not been, is not aligning, right, to that. So I don't know if any of you two, if Tammy or Emil want to add to that and maybe give us more specific examples.
Yeah, I mean, you said it beautifully, Adeline. Like, I think a lot this time in our world has really put a spotlight on anti-Blackness and anti-racism and racism. And I think the overarching piece, I think, is white supremacy is really what we're starting to really think about. Although it's really that's much more difficult than to talk about an anti-racism or anti-Blackness, I think, for some folks. And what I find really interesting is that there are organizations that are putting their hand up and saying, we support, we're in this with you. But when you kind of peel back a layer, you see that the intention now is there, but maybe the history, there needs to be some sort of, acknowledgement of that history, and acknowledgement that maybe, yeah, it's fine to absolutely say we're here now, but a little bit of the reparations of what has happened and transpired before. A good example of what that might look like from an individual perspective would be the Vancouver Candle Company, right?
Oh, yeah.
I think that was a very specific and very overt racism. Like that's a really quote unquote easy one to point out, because as an individual who was, for folks that don't have that context, there were screenshots of text messages where one of the founders actually just overtly was racist in text and actually anti everything. There was a lot of
Yeah.
communities that were pointed out there. And then when you compare that to Aritzia, you really get a fantastic example. And I say this, and I know that that means that there's harm there, so I apologize. But from my perspective as an expert in this field, of institutional racism. Because woven throughout that company, obviously there is practices where people are targeted and racially profiled. There is that white supremacy of the white employees versus those folks that are POC Black employees that aren't receiving the same type of treatment. And that is a fantastic example of institutional racism, of how that whole organization needs to go right back down to the foundation. I want to see their receipts as well as other people. Like, what is their executive doing? How are they looking to diversify their executive? Anti-racism work isn't something that you can just slap a training on. Like, what are their changes of their policy? This is institutional work that, for me, I see the opportunity in Aritzia, because the opportunity is there to change. With individual racism, the Vancouver Candle Company, that there's less opportunity there, because that person needs to actually change that he's at that top of that iceberg where it goes so deep and so evident at the same time,
And my question with that is that it seems like brands are reacting at more of the most unprecedented speed and the depth of change. Like, why is that happening now than before with, what happened with Trayvon Martin and, other things? Why is it happening now and not before?
Anyway, I'll take a little go at that. Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot, like, why now? And I think partly it could be, it's the momentum. I think it's movements building upon movements. And because this anti-racism movement, these cyclical movements that keep happening, this one followed, the Me Too movement, which gained a lot of traction. And I think what people were seeing too is a larger platform, and then an expectation maybe to put out there for people with the larger, these larger platforms, I guess, for the lack of a better word, to say something. And also maybe there's like more calling out. I mean, there might be a safety in numbers kind of thing, because we saw with the Me Too movement that, one person coming out and disclosing, and with and the response being, we support you, we hear you, we understand you, then encourage more people. And then there was kind of like this domino effect, and until you reach a critical mass. And I wonder if it's kind of following that. And also, I'm hoping there is a bit more of an educated audience out there. And one that's maybe, I don't know, maybe it's being optimistic of me, but one that is a little bit more aware and a little bit more maybe like literate in these ways, in terms of understanding racism, anti-racism work, intersectionality, maybe anti-oppression, things like that. Maybe there's this education element to it where people are seeing it through a bit more sophisticated lens. And feeling safer, I guess. I won't say safe to do it, but at least maybe a little safer to speak out, knowing that they've seen the support. So there could be, I don't know, there's probably so many elements, because I know there's been people behind the scenes working and dealing with this and doing this work for so long. And so it is, so I mean, that could be why. And also maybe there is a little bit more of acknowledgement within the corporate cultures that, the business case has been made over and over and over again around, equity, diversity, inclusion. So, they may already have those templates in place, and they're like, they're quicker to respond, or feeling like, I get it. I see the bottom line being attached to this. You know, we see a new demographic with the Gen X, the millennials and the Gen Ys going, you know, we will connect our purchasing power to our values. You know, I think there's a combination of all these things.